Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto, and in this video I'm gonna tell you why I don't shoot film anymore and why I think you probably should. I stopped using film a long time ago. I think it was around 2004 or so. And I don't think I will ever use film again. So I don't shoot film, but I want to make it clear right at the start that I have nothing against film photography. On the contrary, I'm really happy that there's still a lot of people shoot film, and I'm happy that there are a lot of film cameras still in existence. After all, that is the foundation of all photography. And I think it's good to know where all this started from, where it came from, and somehow know the history of whatever it is that you're doing. And after all, it's basically the same thing, whether it's shooting film or shooting digital. We are capturing photographs, we are capturing the light. My main reason not to shoot film anymore is that I've done my fair share of it already in this life. I think I've probably shot somewhere around 25,000 rolls of film during my life, and a few thousand sheets of 4x5 and Polaroid and all kinds of films. And while I'm not saying that the sheer quantity equals to quality, but after all, I used film more than 20 years professionally. So I think I'm qualified to say something about film photography, or at least I know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about film photography. And I didn't love shooting film, I didn't hate it. It was just back then the only way to make photographs. And I bet most photographers back then thought the same way. I mean, you either shot film or you didn't take any pictures. That was just a fact. There was no choice back then. So I bet most photographers didn't think much of the film. I mean, in the way that it was somehow cool to shoot film or something like that. It was just a way to make photographs back then. And my favorite ever film was the Kodak Tri-X. And I knew that film so well as the back of my hand. And I think I have never known any big image capturing media that well, whether it's film or digital. I knew exactly what I will get when I expose a frame of Kodak Tri-X or a sheet or whatever. While I don't really miss film photography, it was in many ways much simpler back then. It was just me and my camera and a roll of film, and that was it. And especially if I traveled, of course it was a kind of a pain to take maybe 20 or 40 rolls of film with you. But today when I travel, I have my camera, I have my batteries, I have my chargers, I have my laptop, I have my tablet, I have my smartphone, I have a bunch of different cables and all that stuff. I have so much stuff with me even on a short trip. And I also feel back then it was a lot less camera talk and more photography, everything. Of course we talked about cameras and lenses, but not as much as today. That's how I feel today at least. And believe it or not, it was also more social, at least for professional photographers. See, at the end of the day, at the end of every day, I would drop off my films in the lab. And the lab would run their very first E6 process very early in the morning, and the films would be ready at around 7 or 8 in the morning. And pretty much every morning I would go there back to the lab to pick up my films, and on the light table in the lab, I would select the frames I would deliver to my clients that day. And a bunch of other photographers would do the same thing. So we were all bent over the light table in the lab and selecting our frames to deliver. And while doing that, we would also exchange a few words. And back then I knew my colleagues and I knew how they look like, and how they sound like, and I felt I knew them a lot better. But today, photographers just work alone. They do their assignment, then they go back to their office or home, wherever they do their post-processing, and then they send a link to the client to download the pictures. So today it's much more like a solitary job. But back then, at least, you met your colleagues and fellow photographers several times a week. Shortly, but you still kind of knew who your colleagues were. But having just said that, I don't really miss film photography. I think digital is so much better suited for what I do right now. But I have a couple of, or more than a couple of reasons for you guys, if you have never tried film photography, why you should definitely try it. But let me first show you some photos that I shot on film long time ago. Alright, that was some old stuff, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but I feel that I still shoot pretty much the same way I did 20 or 30 years ago. Maybe it's a sign that I haven't progressed at all during the last 20 or 30 years. Anyway, here are some reasons why I think you should definitely shoot some film. First of all, if you have never ever tried film, I think it's worth trying. And I'm sure if I had never shot any film, I'd certainly be interested in trying it. And today it's relatively easy, and you always have the choice to go back to your digital camera at any second you feel like that. Back then, when I started, there was no such choice. Like I said before, you either used film or you didn't take any pictures. That was it. And shooting film is a very different experience from any digital shooting. It's very pure, straightforward, and somehow simple process. And it forces you to slow down just a bit and think what you're doing before you hit the shutter. You have that limited amount of frames on your roll of film, and you know that every time you hit the shutter, it's gonna cost you X amount of money. And of course, digital is not free either, far from that. But there's no, like, how would you say, immediate cost after every press of the shutter. Like it is with film. You know that the processing of the film and the scanning and the prints or whatever, they are going to cost something. There's no way to preview the picture or chimp afterwards. You just have to kind of know what you're doing and think about the exposure values and all those much more carefully as you would do with the digital probably. And I really recommend the full film experience, and that would be shoot a roll of film, process it yourself, and print it yourself. And especially the first two parts of the process are pretty easy. The shooting part, of course, is kind of easy. You just put a roll of film in your camera and start shooting. And if you shoot black and white, also the processing part is relatively straightforward. You can do it at home, but you gotta be careful, and if you do it many times, you have to sort of standardize your process so that you do it the same way every time. That's the only way to kind of guarantee that you get constant results. But the printing part can be tricky, and you probably want to look if there's a local club that has a darkroom or something, because setting up a darkroom at home is kind of a lot of work and maybe too much for most people. You have to be pretty sure that you are going to do a lot of printing before setting up a real darkroom anywhere. But I strongly recommend you to do the whole process, because if you just shoot a roll of color negative film and leave it to the local lab or wherever you can have it processed these days and make them scan all the negatives for you. That's just maybe quarter of the film experience, and the full experience includes doing it all, at least the film processing part yourself, but preferably also the printing part. But I agree the printing part is kind of steep, especially for a beginner. But if you have a local club that has a darkroom, then try to get access there and make some prints too. It's really cool experience to see the picture appear on the piece of paper. And one more reason is that film cameras are really cool devices and they are cheap these days. You can get some really cool film cameras for very little money these days. Of course, some rare cameras and some Leicas always cost a lot, but you can get some really nice cameras for very little money, and that part is very cheap. And even if you never shot more than a couple of rolls of film, that film camera still looks good on your shelf or wherever. The film is kind of expensive these days, and the processing too, I guess, because there are not that many labs anymore around. But still, it's not so expensive that you couldn't afford maybe a roll or two. And if you choose to buy black and white chemicals to process your black and white film yourself, those are not expensive either. So highly recommended. And I bet you didn't know that here in Finland we have one of the biggest used camera stores. I'll put their link down in the description so you can take a look. And they are not sponsoring this video, I'm just throwing you the link just in case you're interested. And their webpage is kind of fun to browse. Just to take a look what kind of odd cameras there are in existence, because their selection is so amazing and there are some really rare and odd cameras you've never even heard of. And I know the owner, it's a reliable place to buy. They don't sell you any crap. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.